Hi, I'm Elaine, and before you hear my story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you stopped seeing the truth? If you have, then this story is for you. This one isn't easy to tell, but if you've ever trusted someone so deeply that you ignored your instincts, then this story is for you. Because sometimes, the people closest to us write the most dangerous lies. I was that kind of woman, loyal, careful, quiet. I believed love meant safety. I believed my husband, David, was gone forever, until the day of his funeral. It was a gray Florida morning, the kind where the clouds hang low and the air tastes like salt and flowers. People spoke softly, as if volume itself could break something sacred. And then, as the minister said his final words, my phone buzzed in my purse. Just one vibration. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. David, one new message. My stomach twisted. I opened it. I'm still alive. Trust no one. For a moment, everything around me disappeared, the voices, the flowers, the grave. All I could hear was my own heartbeat. I locked the phone, pretending nothing had happened. People hugged me, told me to stay strong. But strength felt fake when you're living a lie you don't understand. That night I sat alone in our living room, the house still smelling like lilies and rain. I read that message again and again. The timestamp said, "Sent 2 minutes after the casket was lowered." That's when I knew this wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. From that night on, I couldn't see my life the same way. Every face looked suspicious. Every memory started to rearrange itself. What began as mourning was about to become an investigation. And by the time I found the truth, I would have to destroy everything I thought was safe. In the next part, I'll tell you about the first clue, a single folded bank receipt that shouldn't have existed, and the moment I stopped being a grieving widow and became something else entirely. Chapter 1. The Ledger of Truth. By the next morning, I'd convinced myself it had to be a glitch. Maybe the carrier recycled his number. Maybe it was spam wearing his name. That's the thing about denial, it's the most polite kind of fear. I made coffee, black like he used to drink it, and sat at the kitchen table that still held 2 cups. Across from me, his chair waited like a question I didn't want to answer. That's when I noticed the envelope. It had slid halfway beneath yesterday's newspaper, a thin, cream-colored fold from First Gulf Credit Union, our joint bank. The postmark was 2 days before the accident. Inside was a monthly statement, except it wasn't our household account. The name read, David Porter, Trustee, Westline Holdings. I'd never heard of it. At first, the numbers didn't register. Then I saw it. A transfer of $42,000, labeled Escrow B Insurance AG. The date matched the morning he supposedly left for that construction site. I felt my pulse in my fingertips. He told me he was overdrawn, that we needed to cut costs, that I should sell my mother's ring. Yet here was proof of another account money moved days before his accident. I reached for my phone. The message from his number still sat there, unread but impossible to delete. I'm still alive. Trust no one. Trust no one. I whispered it aloud, just to hear how it sounded in the air. The house felt different after that emptier, but also alert, like it had heard me. By noon, I drove to First Gulf. The parking lot shimmered in the heat, and every step to the glass doors felt heavier than the last. Inside, the air smelled of paper and perfume. A young teller named Mara smiled the way people do when they've practiced empathy. "How can I help you today, Mrs. Porter?" I handed her the envelope. "This came to our address. I think there's a bladed mistake." She typed, paused, frowned slightly. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but this account is restricted. Trustee access only." I leaned closer. "Trustee means my husband, but my husband is dead." She hesitated, glanced toward a man in a navy suit, the branch manager. A quiet conversation followed. When he approached, his smile was thinner. "Mrs. Porter, maybe we can schedule an appointment next week, once we verify documentation. I'll just need a death certificate and—" He stopped mid-sentence. Behind him, his screen flashed something, a last login date. I saw it reflected in his glasses. Yesterday, someone had accessed that account after the funeral. Driving home, I felt the world split into 2 layers. the surface of ordinary grief and the undercurrent of conspiracy running beneath it. Every road sign looked unfamiliar, every familiar face untrustworthy. That evening, I opened David's old desk drawers, neat rows of receipts, warranties, insurance pamphlets. He'd been meticulous, almost obsessive about order. But behind the bottom drawer liner, I found a ledger handwritten, bound with twine. Inside were columns of dates, initials, and amounts. Some entries matched the transfers from the bank statement. Others were coded B, M, H, Holdings, R, Fee, 12, K. On the final page, in his handwriting, one line, "If anything happens, start with the numbers, D." It wasn't a confession, it was instructions. That night, I laid the ledger on the kitchen table beside the statement and my phone, 3 artifacts of a marriage that no longer existed. I decided to call his brother, Mark, who had arranged the funeral. "Mark," I said, keeping my voice steady, "did David ever mention a company called Westline Holdings?" A pause. Then, too quickly, "No." "Why?" "There's a bank account in his name." "Active," he exhaled, a sound that wasn't quite surprise. "Elaine, you're exhausted. You're seeing ghosts. Let it go, okay?" Ghosts. That word lingered like smoke. After we hung up, I checked the ledger again. The initials MP appeared beside multiple entries and one note. Check due after closure. MP Mark Porter, my brother-in-law. The ledger wasn't just David's secret. It was theirs. I photocopied every page the next morning at the library. The clerk didn't ask questions. When she handed me the warm stack of copies, I felt something shift. Fear was still there, but it was joined by purpose. That afternoon, a white SUV idled outside my driveway for almost 10 minutes. No one got out. When I stepped onto the porch, it pulled away slowly, no plates on the back. That's when I knew this wasn't just financial. Someone was watching. I locked the doors, drew the curtains, and wrote 3 sentences in my journal, the start of my own record. July 12th, 6:47 p.m., white SUV, unknown driver. Ledger confirmed. Trust no one. From that night forward, every detail went into that notebook, names, times, receipts, because if David had built a life on secrets, I would build mine on evidence. And yet, one question kept echoing louder than all the others. If he truly was alive, why warn me? Music fades lower. In the next chapter, the first boundary, you'll hear what happened the night someone tried to enter the house he built, and how the locks that once kept me safe became my first line of battle. Chapter 2. The first boundary. By midnight, the air felt too still. The ceiling fan ticked like a heartbeat out of rhythm. I'd locked every door, double-checked every window. Still, I couldn't sleep. When grief changes shape, it doesn't cry anymore, it listens. And that night, my grief was listening for footsteps. At 2:14 a.m., I heard one, just a single creak on the back porch. Then silence. I waited, barely breathing, every muscle tight with the memory of that text. Trust no one. The next morning, I drove straight to the hardware store. The clerk, an older man with kind eyes, said, "You moving into a new place?" I smiled too quickly. Something like that. I bought new locks, a motion light, and a small camera, the kind marketed for pet monitoring. It felt absurd, but it was something to hold on to. By 2 p.m., I was standing on the porch, screwdriver in hand, removing the lock David had installed himself, the last barrier of the life we'd built. As the pins clicked free, I caught my reflection in the window-tired eyes, trembling jaw, and for the first time, I said it out loud. He lied to me. The new lock turned smoothly. Click. A sound both final and freeing. That's when I noticed the mailbox flag raised. Inside was a manila envelope, no stamp, just my name written in David's handwriting. Inside, a USB drive and a single note. Don't let them find the safe. No signature, no explanation. That night, I plugged the USB into my old laptop. The folder opened to a single file, Ledger Backup, XLS. Inside were spreadsheets, contact lists, and transaction trails, dozens of them. Transfers to shell companies, many under names I didn't recognize, but one caught my eye. R. Marin, legal retainer. Ruth Marin, our family attorney. She'd handled the will. I scrolled further, her firm name appeared 5 more times. By the time I closed the laptop, the room felt smaller. Even Ruth might be part of it. Trust no one, I whispered again. I copied the files to a flash drive and hid the original in the freezer under a bag of frozen peas. A ridiculous place, but I needed to think like someone being watched. At 3:12 a.m., the motion light outside flicked on. Through the blinds, I saw the outline of a person near the garage. They didn't try the door, they just stood there. I dialed 911. My voice was steady, almost detached. Someone's outside my home. Please send a unit. By the time the officer arrived, the figure was gone. He walked the perimeter, found nothing. He asked, "Any enemies, ma'am?" I almost laughed. Not until this week. He left a business card and told me to call if it happened again. But the next morning, I noticed faint boot prints in the mud near the fence, fresh, large, and deep. Not from the officer. I called Ruth that afternoon. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "Elaine, I was just about to reach out about finalizing the estate." "Ruth," I said carefully, "was David involved with a company called Westline Holdings?" A pause. The sound of papers shifting. "I can't disclose client matters posthumously, you know that." "Client?" I asked. "He was your client before the will?" "I'm sorry, Elaine. You sound distressed. Maybe take some time." And then she hung up. The silence after that call was heavier than any argument. That evening, I found the safe. Not hidden behind paintings or walls, just behind a false panel in his workshop, sealed with 2 screws. Inside were deeds, USBs, and a stack of passports, 5, each with David's photo under different names. And at the bottom, a single Polaroid of me, smiling, unaware, holding a cup of coffee at the kitchen table. On the back, written in his handwriting, "She doesn't know yet." My knees gave out. The world tilted. That's when I realized this wasn't just betrayal, it was surveillance. He'd been watching me long before he died. Soft static fades in a motif of paranoia. By now, the police reports, the USB, the ledger, they weren't just clues. They were my protection. I scanned everything, stored digital copies under new file names, grocery lists, pet meds, garden plans. If someone got into my computer, they'd have to earn the truth. I also started calling around quietly. A friend of mine, Tanya, worked part-time at a property management office. When I mentioned Westline Holdings, she went quiet. "I've seen that name," she whispered. "They buy foreclosed homes. Cash. Mostly under one man, a Mark Porter. Mark, my brother-in-law." The ledger was right. He wasn't just helping with the funeral, he was inheriting what David had built in secret. That night, I wrote in my journal again. Boundary set. Locks changed. He watched me before. They're watching now. And below it, the phrase that had become my lifeline. Trust no one. But this time, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like strategy. Soft piano motif swells slightly. That week, I changed my passwords, withdrew a small amount of cash, and opened a P.O. box 2 towns over. It felt paranoid, maybe even dramatic, but grief had given me a new education, survival. Because when people build lies, they count on your politeness to keep them alive. And I was done being polite. Short reflective pause. By Friday, a letter arrived at the P.O. box. No return address. Same handwriting. Inside, just 4 words. They know you know. Piano fades into quiet tension tone. In the next chapter, The Breach, you'll hear what happened when the safe was emptied and how the person I thought was protecting me turned out to be the one feeding them everything I said. Chapter 3. The Breach. I used to think silence was safety. That if I stayed quiet long enough, the danger would pass me by. But silence is also a signal. It tells the people watching that you're still afraid. 3 nights after that anonymous letter, I came home to find the back door slightly open. Not broken, just unlatched. The kind of mistake I would never make. Inside, the air was wrong. Too still, too clean. The faint scent of lemon polish hung in the hallway, masking something else metal, cold and sharp. I went straight to the workshop. The panel behind the tool rack was gone. The safe door stood wide open, empty. Every document, every passport, every photo gone. Only the dust pattern remained, like ghosts of evidence. Someone had been inside, not to steal money, but to erase proof. I called the officer who'd left his card. He came, looked around, took notes that meant nothing. "No sign of forced entry," he said. Maybe I'd forgotten to lock up. Maybe grief was making me careless. I didn't argue, because the truth wasn't for him anymore. It was for me. After he left, I sat in the dark living room with the flashlight off, watching the reflection of my phone screen on the window. If they were outside, they could see the glow. If they were inside, they could see me waiting. At 12:47 a.m., another message arrived. Unknown number this time. 4 words again. You weren't supposed to look. I stared at it for a long time before deleting it, not because I wanted it gone, but because I wanted to see who would try to resend it. The next morning, I visited Tanya at her office. She'd pulled a few property files under Westline Holdings, all cash purchases, all signed by a proxy named E. Harrow. When she turned the screen toward me, my stomach dropped. The email on the header was mine, my personal address. Someone had been using my name to move property, forging digital signatures, creating a trail that pointed straight at me. I felt the floor shift beneath my feet. If they could access David's accounts, and now mine, I was no longer a widow, I was a suspect waiting to be built. That night, I packed a small bag, laptop, ledger copies, flash drive, journal. I left the house dark, parked 2 streets away, and walked back to watch from the shadows. At 1:03 a.m., the same white SUV rolled up the driveway. 2 men stepped out. One carried a box, the other had a flashlight. They went inside with a key. Not a pick, not a crowbar, a key. Mark had a key, so did Ruth. 10 minutes later, they came out empty-handed. The box was gone. I followed at a distance until they turned onto Highway 41, then I pulled over and wrote the time, the license plate, and the phrase I kept repeating under my breath, "Trust no one." By morning, the house looked untouched again. No broken locks, no footprints. Only one thing out of place. The photo of David on the mantel was turned face down. Whoever had been there wanted me to know they'd been close enough to touch it. That was the moment fear stopped being the engine of my story. From then on, it became fuel. I went to a payphone outside a diner and called an old acquaintance, Detective Alvarez, retired but restless. He owed David a favor, though I didn't tell him why I was calling. I said only, "I need someone who remembers how to follow money without asking why." He laughed softly. "You always did ask for storms, Elaine." Within an hour, I emailed him the files from a library computer. And for the first time since the funeral, I felt a small, steady current of relief. Not safety, but momentum. When I returned home, a single envelope sat on the porch. No handwriting this time, just a printed label. Final notice. Inside wasn't a bill. It was a deed transfer. My house sold, signed electronically. My name again. Someone was erasing my life piece by piece, replacing me on paper while I was still breathing. I called the county clerk. She confirmed the sale had cleared 2 days ago. Cash buyer, Westline Holdings. I thanked her, hung up, and sat down on the porch steps. The sun was high, the neighborhood quiet. A mocking sort of peace. If they wanted me gone, they would have to face me first. But before that, I needed to know how deep this went and who was still alive to answer for it. In the next chapter, I'll tell you about the ally who found me before they did, and how the first real proof of David's survival arrived not through a message this time, but a voice. Chapter 4. The Ally. I drove without a destination. Every street felt borrowed, every mile a line I shouldn't cross. When your name is being rewritten, even a gas receipt can betray you. At a diner off Route 19, I stopped for coffee. The waitress poured it wordlessly, eyes flicking toward the window where my car sat alone under the neon light. She said, You look like someone who's waiting for a call." She was right. The phone rang before I'd finished the cup. Unknown number again. But the voice was different this time. Older, careful. "Mrs. Porter? My name's Alvarez. You left something interesting in my inbox." I swallowed the relief before it could sound like trust. "I didn't think you'd call. I said I'd owe David a favor. Didn't say I'd forget it. But you should know what you sent me isn't just shady. It's federal shady." "What does that mean?" "Westline Holdings isn't a company. It's a net. Dozens of shell core, all feeding one central account. Transfers route through the Caymans. But the origin," he paused, "looks like it starts here, in Clearwater, under your husband's name." I pressed the phone to my ear so hard it hurt. "He's dead, Alvarez." "Maybe. Or maybe someone wanted you to believe that long enough to sign a few things." Silence stretched between us. He finally said, "Meet me tomorrow. Don't bring your phone. And don't drive your car." Then he hung up. The next morning I borrowed Tanya's old sedan. We met at a park overlooking the bay, broad daylight, families nearby, nothing secret but our words. Alvarez looked older than I remembered. His gray hair had gone white around the edges, and his eyes scanned the horizon even when I spoke. He placed a folder on the bench between us. Inside were printouts of transfers, property records, a passport photo. David's face stared back, but the name below read Elliot Harrow, the same name on the property deeds, the same signature as mine, forged cleanly beside it. I whispered, "He's alive." Alvarez nodded once. "Or someone wants you to." "I think he is. Either way, you've got to move fast. These accounts are collapsing, money's being drained daily. By the time you go public, the proof will be gone." I asked, "Who's helping him?" He hesitated. "His brother. And your lawyer. But they're not the architects. There's someone higher, someone who funded all of this." "Who?" He looked at me for a long time, then said quietly, "You." I laughed, but it broke halfway out. He slid another paper across the bench, a tax return with my signature. The ink too perfect, the date 3 weeks after the funeral. "You're listed as the silent partner in every property deal," he said. "On record, you've been signing everything. They're laundering through you. You're the cover story." I felt the ground shift under the weight of it. Every piece of my life had been weaponized against me. My grief, my name, my trust. Alvarez leaned forward. "Here's what you do. Go home. Don't confront them yet. Wait for the next contact. They'll reach out, they always do when they think you're cornered. When they do, record everything." I asked. "And then?" "Then we burn it all down." That night I sat by the window, recorder hidden under the table lamp, waiting. It didn't take long. At 9:22, the phone rang. Mark's voice filled the room. "Elaine, we need to talk about the house. There's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" He hesitated. "I know you've been asking questions." "That's dangerous right now. Just stay quiet until we sort this out," I said. "You mean until I disappear on paper?" He exhaled sharply. "You were never supposed to see the accounts." Then the line went dead. I stared at the phone, my pulse steady this time, because every word had been recorded. The next day, Alvarez texted from an unlisted number. "Got it. Building case file. Stay dark." But the storm didn't wait. 2 days later, Tanya called from her office whispering, "Elaine, someone's here asking about you. They said they're with insurance, but they showed me a badge federal." Within hours, a black sedan parked near my street. Men in suits, sunglasses, no insignia. I packed again. Only the essentials this time. Flash drive, journal, recorder, one photograph of my mother. As I left, I looked back at the house, my house on paper, theirs in secret, and whispered the words that had followed me since the funeral. Trust no one, only now they didn't sound like a warning. They sounded like a promise. Because the next time I heard my husband's voice, it wouldn't be through a message. It would be in person. And I would be ready. In the next chapter, The Voice, you'll hear how that call came not from the living, but from a recording David left behind to control the story long after he was gone. Chapter 5. The Voice. The call came just before dawn. No number. Just the word unknown. I almost didn't answer, but some part of me already knew it wouldn't stop until I did. I pressed the phone to my ear and whispered, "Hello?" For a moment there was only static, soft, uneven, like the sound of a heartbeat underwater. Then a voice broke through. His voice. "David." "Elaine," he said. "If you're hearing this, something went wrong." I froze. The sound was unmistakable, his tone, the slight rasp on the R's. But the rhythm was off, mechanical, looped. "A recording. I didn't mean to disappear," he continued. "They forced me out. The money wasn't mine. You have to protect yourself. Don't trust anyone, not even Mark." Then, silence. And a click. The message replayed itself automatically, looping like an echo from the grave. When it ended, my hands were shaking, but my mind wasn't. Because I recognized the background noise behind his words, the low hum of his workshop fan. That meant the recording had been made in my house. I searched every drawer, every vent, every light fixture. Finally, behind a false panel above the desk, I found it. A small black recorder, wired to an old battery pack. Next to it, a single micro SD card labeled EP Final. I played it. This time, there was no static. Only David's voice, calm, deliberate. "If you find this, I need you to understand. Nothing was what it seemed. Westline was built to hide something bigger, not money, people, witnesses. I took the funds to protect them. But if you're listening now, they found me first. Don't let them rewrite me." The words landed heavy, like stones in water. He wasn't confessing to theft. He was confessing to fear. I sat there until the fan kicked on again, filling the room with the same background hum that haunted the recording. He had been here, recording his goodbye, while I was in the next room making dinner. Maybe that's what love had become between us, parallel silences. I copied the files, hid the originals, and sent one version to Alvarez. He called an hour later. "This changes everything," he said. "If he was working as an informant, this whole thing might be under federal seal. It means we're not chasing criminals anymore. We're chasing cover-ups." I asked, "So he's alive?" He didn't answer right away. Finally he said, "Either alive or too dangerous to confirm dead." It didn't feel like comfort. It felt like the beginning of another kind of loss, one without a body to bury. That night I drove to the edge of the bay. The water was black glass, and the air carried that same mix of salt and rain that always meant change. I played the message again, just to hear his voice against the wind. "I didn't mean to disappear. Don't trust anyone." It didn't sound like warning anymore. It sounded like permission. The next morning, Alvarez sent me coordinates, an old storage facility under David's alias, Elliot Harrow, Unit 17B, registered 3 months before his death. I drove there just after noon. The manager didn't ask for ID, just glanced at the key tag I held up. The door groaned open, releasing the stale air of secrets too long kept. Inside were boxes labeled blueprints, invoices, archive. But one was marked home. Inside that box were photos of us vacations, birthdays, my face blurred in motion. And at the bottom, a sealed envelope with my name. The handwriting was his. I tore it open. Inside were 2 pages. The first, "If you're reading this, they know you've seen everything. Trust no one, especially the ones who say they're helping." The second, a single address, no name, no explanation, just an address in Tampa. I folded the paper, placed it in my pocket, and drove away with a single thought looping in my mind. If David was alive, this was where the truth lived. And if he wasn't, this was where his ghost was waiting. In the next chapter, The Address, I'll tell you what I found behind that door and why the truth about my husband was darker than any lie he ever told me. Chapter 6. The Address. I reached Tampa just before sunset. The sky was the color of old bruises, purple fading to gold, clouds hanging low enough to touch. The address led me to an industrial block near the port, rows of storage units and silent warehouses. Number 412 looked abandoned, windows boarded, padlock rusted. But when I tried the door, it clicked open, unlocked. Inside, dust floated through the air like memory. A single light bulb swayed above a metal desk. On it, stacks of files, a laptop, and one photograph taped to the wall. David, standing beside two men in suits, and me, blurred in the background, at a charity gala from 3 years earlier. Someone had cropped the picture to circle only my face. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it echo. I stepped closer. The folders were labeled with names, each followed by case numbers and amounts. Witness, relocation, fraud investigation, offshore accounts. Every line traced back to one heading, Project Westline. I sat at the desk and opened the laptop. Password protected. But when I typed in Elliot Harrow, it unlocked. On the screen was a folder titled Final Proof. Inside were video clips, documents, and surveillance photos. Each file name started with a date, all from the month before David's death. The first clip opened on David's face. He looked exhausted, unshaven, but alive. He said, "If this ever reaches Elaine, then I failed. But she deserves the truth. Westline wasn't about money, it was about erasure. They paid us to make people disappear. Paper deaths, fake identities, new passports. When I wanted out, they turned it on me. If you're seeing this, they're coming for you too." I paused the video, my hands shaking. Everything I'd believed, every gentle lie about overtime, every unexplained call had been part of this. He hadn't died. He'd been erased. Footsteps echoed behind me. I turned. A figure stood in the doorway, half in shadow. "Mark." He smiled the way predators do when they think you've stopped running. "You were supposed to burn it all, Elaine. That was the deal." My voice came out steadier than I expected. "The deal? Or the lie you told to clean up his mess?" He stepped forward, hands open like he was calming a frightened animal. "David got in too deep. He dragged us all down. I tried to contain it. You were never meant to find this." I pointed to the screen. "He said they'd come for me." Mark's eyes flicked to the laptop, then back to me. "Then he was right." He lunged. I grabbed the flash drive from the port and ran. The hallway blurred past metal, dust, and the sound of my own breath. Behind me, Mark shouted my name, but I didn't look back. Outside, the night hit like cold water. I jumped into the car and drove without lights until I reached the highway. Only when the city lights vanished behind me did I start to shake. The flash drive was still in my hand. On it, David's confession, and the proof that none of this had been an accident. I called Alvarez. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Finally, a text came through. "Don't go home." They already did. My hands went numb. I pulled to the shoulder, headlights off, and watched the world spin into silence. The last place I could run was gone. So I drove to the only safe place left, the cemetery, the grave that wasn't real. David's stone gleamed faintly under the moonlight. I knelt beside it, placed the flash drive against the marble, and whispered, "This is all that's left of you." I thought I was alone until I heard the crunch of footsteps behind me. A flashlight beam swept across the grass. A voice said, "Elaine, step away from the stone." Alvarez. He looked tired, older than before. He took the flash drive gently from my hand. "I told you not to go alone," he said. Then softer, "He's alive, Elaine. We just don't know whose side he's on." I stared at him, trying to process the words. Alive, somewhere. And for the first time, the phrase that had followed me for weeks changed meaning again. Trust no one didn't mean fear anymore. It meant freedom, because now I knew exactly who not to trust. In the next chapter, The Hearing, I'll tell you how I brought the truth to light and what it cost me to finally speak David's name in public again. Chapter 7, The Hearing. I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who walked into a courthouse carrying ghosts, but that morning, I did. The proof was in a small black envelope tucked inside my coat, the flash drive, the ledger copies, David's voice. Everything that had nearly buried me was now evidence. Alvarez met me on the courthouse steps. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Behind him, the sky was pale and flat, like it was waiting to see which of us would make it out alive. He said, "Keep your answers simple. Don't speculate. Just tell them what you know." Inside, the hearing room smelled of paper and cold coffee. 3 officials sat behind a long oak table. One read my name into the record, his tone clinical, detached. Mrs. Elaine Porter, you've provided material suggesting a coordinated fraud involving Westline Holdings. Do you understand the risks of testifying? I nodded, my voice barely above a whisper. I've been living them. They asked about the bank transfers, the fake deeds, the aliases. Each question was another stone added to a tower of deceit that had taken years to build. I told them about the message at the funeral, about Mark, about the recording from David. When I finished, one of them, a woman with tired eyes and perfect posture, leaned forward. Mrs. Porter, she said, if your husband is still alive, what do you believe his role is now? I took a breath. He started as a victim, I said, then a witness, and now, I don't know. Maybe he's the ghost that keeps them afraid. For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the woman nodded. Your testimony is entered into the record. That was it. No applause, no closure, just paperwork. Outside, reporters swarmed the steps, shouting my name. Alvarez shielded me with his coat. We didn't stop walking until we reached the car. He drove in silence for miles. Finally, he said, You did it. It's on the record. They can't erase you now. I looked out the window. The city blurred by the same streets, the same sunlight, but everything felt distant, washed out. They can still erase him, I said. He didn't answer. 2 days later, Alvarez called again. They froze the accounts, he said. Every shell company tied to Westline is under investigation. But there's something else. He paused. They found new transfers, ones that happened after the hearing, from a system only one person could access. I didn't speak. He said it for me. David. I hung up before the silence could crush me. That night, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. Part of me wanted another message. Part of me prayed it would never come. At 3:19 a.m., the screen lit up. David, one new message. The text was short. You did the right thing. Keep going. No number traceable, no metadata. Just words from the void. I didn't cry this time, because grief had turned into something sharper resolve. The next morning, a government sedan pulled up outside my house. 2 agents stepped out, asking for Alvarez. He wasn't there. He'd gone dark. His phone straight to voicemail, his office empty. And that's when I realized the hearing hadn't ended the story. It had just made me visible again. They knew my face now. They knew my voice. And if David was still alive, somewhere behind all of this, he knew it too. I wrote in my journal that night, The truth is public. The danger is permanent. Trust no one, not even ghosts. In the next chapter, The Aftermath, I'll tell you what happened when the headlines faded, when Alvarez vanished, and how I finally found peace in a world where trust had to be earned one heartbeat at a time. Chapter 8, The Aftermath. When the headlines faded, silence returned, the kind that feels too wide to cross. The papers called it the Westline scandal. They printed my name under the words key witness, but no one printed what it really cost. The house was empty again. No flashing lights, no cameras, just me and the quiet hum of the refrigerator. It was almost peaceful. Almost. People said I was brave. They didn't see the locks I changed twice a month, or the way I paused before opening mail. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's learning how to live beside it. I started volunteering at the library, scanning old newspapers, filing, histories that belonged to other people. It helped. Paper doesn't lie. It just waits for someone to read it right. One afternoon, a man dropped off a box of donations, old books, some records, a stack of photo frames. At the bottom was a small envelope with my name, typed neatly. No return address. Inside was a single flash drive. No note. I hesitated before plugging it in. The folder was named Closure. Inside, one video file, for Elaine. I clicked play. David's face filled the screen. Older now, with a beard and a scar along his jaw. He looked into the camera like he knew exactly when I'd be watching. I don't know what you had to do to survive, he said. But you did it. I told you not to trust anyone, and that included me. I'm sorry for every wall I made you build. You were the only part that was real. He paused, swallowed hard. I can't come back. Too many people would vanish for real if I did, but I wanted you to know it's over. You're safe now." The video ended with the sound of waves and gulls. No coordinates, no date. Just a life already moving somewhere I couldn't follow. I sat there for a long time, the screen still glowing. Then I unplugged the drive and walked down to the shore. The tide was coming in the same rhythm that had marked the start of everything. I threw the drive into the water and watched it sink. The ripples spread out, caught the last light of the sun, and disappeared. Weeks passed. Investigations closed. The officials moved on to other scandals. Mark pleaded guilty to fraud and left the state. Ruth lost her license. And Alvarez, he sent a single postcard. No return address, just 5 words. "You made the record right." I kept that postcard in my journal, pressed between the first page and the last. Sometimes at night, I still think I hear David's voice, not from the phone, not from a recording, but in memory. The cadence soft, like it used to be when we whispered in the dark. And I whisper back, I did trust someone. I trusted myself. Because in the end, that was the boundary that saved me, the one no one else could cross. I still live in the same town, near the same shore. People pass me in the grocery store and don't recognize my name. That's fine. Names can lie. Peace can't. So if you're listening, if you've ever been told to trust no one, listen closer. It doesn't mean live in fear. It means learn the difference between silence and survival. And maybe one day, like me, you'll look back at the ruins and realize they were never ruins at all, just the foundation for starting over. Outro. That was my story. I was mourning my husband. Then his number called me. Don't trust anyone. If it found you at the right moment, I hope you hold your own truth a little tighter. Maybe you've buried something too, a lie, a loss, a version of yourself that didn't make it through. Let it rest. But never stop listening for what's real. Thank you for staying until the end. If you want to hear more stories like this about what survives when everything else falls apart, stay with me. Subscribe, share, or just sit in the quiet for a while. Because sometimes, the quiet is where the truth finally speaks.